Hello everyone and welcome back to Parsit Games. Today's video is gonna be a bit different. Recently I found myself thinking back to the early days of Five Nights at Freddy's. By that I mean the time between the release of the first and the second game, when all we had to go off and try to understand the story was just the contents of the first game. Most of us probably still remember some of the more popular theories, including for example Game Theory's very first FNAF theory, which came out all the way back in October of 2014. But that got me thinking, what was the very first FNAF theory out there? Now if you take a look at the Google Trends graph for the search term Five Nights at Freddy's theory or FNAF theory, all of these terms paint pretty much the same picture. These had their peak in November of 2014, most likely caused by the aforementioned game theory video spreading awareness of the game. But as I can also see, there seems to have been some interest in the game, especially theories about the game even earlier in September and August, which I might add is actually the month of the original game's release. So that kinda begs the question, what kind of theories were floating around the internet in the 2-month period between the release of the original game and the game really hitting the mainstream? The first thing that came to my mind in my research on this topic was to check the Five Nights at Freddy's wiki using the Wayback Machine. In case you don't know what the Wayback Machine is, it's a website that periodically archives websites from all corners of the internet. You can enter a URL and find old versions of almost any website. For example, this is what the Scratch website looked like on the actual day of Five Nights at Freddy's release, which was August 8th, 2014. It's pretty cool and kinda nostalgic. But when I tried to use the Wayback Machine for the FNAF wiki, the oldest version still stored was November 25th, 2018, which isn't exactly the time period for early FNAF theories. So it seemed that the Wayback Machine would not be able to help me in my search for the very first FNAF theories, so I decided to turn to Google. And you might not have known about this, but Google actually offers many tricks that you can use to make your search query more specific. For example, you can put a certain word or phrase in quotation marks to tell Google to only present websites that actually include the word or sentence in the order that you've given. But you can also search for results from a specific time period by using before. So by entering before 2014-08-22, I could search for websites that were created within 2 weeks of the original game's release in order to narrow down my search a little bit. And one of the results that I found was this old thread about Five Nights at Freddy's on the Technodrome forums, which was created on August 13th, 2014, just 5 days after the game's release. I actually read through the whole thread, and it's actually kinda interesting to see people talk about FNAF before it was actually popular, because it really reminds you of how strange and original the concept actually was at the time. And the first post on the thread that had anything to do with the story was this one by Shirokame. The marionette killed those children. I think the guard that was accused arrested was framed by that blasted thing. Check out the minigame on YouTube. Give gifts, give life. And this comment seemed to really spark interest in the actual story of the game, because almost every other comment on the thread after this one is people theorizing about the game's story. But as you probably could tell from the mentioning of the marionette, this post is actually from November 13th, 2014. It's definitely interesting, but hardly the 2-month period we were looking for. So I continued my research for quite a while, reading through old articles and forum posts, until I found what might just be the very first cohesive FNAF theory. This is what I heard what happened in 1987. They were working on a real moving and working robot that could replace the work of the people walking around in suits. The project was scrapped when the program went haywire and ended up killing a kid, I think at a birthday. Later they hired a guy who just got out of jail to work at Freddy's. He was a brother to one of the managers, I think. This guy was a straight up psychopath. I mean not your normal one, the one that hides it until you're all alone and hopeless and then goes crazy on you. Anyway, he told some kids that he had a present for some kids behind the stage, and once he lured them there, he stuffed the kids into the suits. As you know, the bodies were never found, and a few months later they found mucus forming around the eyes of the suits. They also reported stolen food from the kitchen, though it wasn't much. The reason why you can hear some of them in the kitchen and why there's a camera there. From what I understand is when one of the costumes needs to retire from their job, they find people that stay after hours like cleaners and whatnot to replace them. Now in 2014 people say that the bears are remodels of the old prototype from 1987, and that's why they are so lifelike and also able to get away with murder. A lot of places like this are closing down due to not enough business and kids staying in and playing video games, so the place is really under budget. You, looking for a job to help pay the bills, find Freddy's and decide to take the easy job as a security guard due to the recent events of food missing again. And there you have it, security guard at a low rundown child arcade simulator. This was the theory posted by Star X Stone on the Steam community forums on August 20th, 2014, just 12 days after the game's release. As you could tell, it's a somewhat crude theory with very little explanation. The most interesting aspect is probably the fact that it assumes that the game takes place in the present, 2014. While most theories out there today pinpoint the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza establishment seen in the first game to be set sometime in the early 90s. The theory keeps what actually happened very vague. But from my understanding, it seems that the suits were possessed by the children which were stuffed into them by the killer. This is a pretty widespread and accepted conclusion. But this theory brings up an interesting idea. It seems that the spirits which you encounter during your playthrough are actually not those of the original children which were lured behind the stage and killed. Instead, you are facing the spirits of your predecessors. Other people that stay after hours, cleaners and whatnot. This definition probably includes security guards like you. So this is the reason why the animatronics are coming for you during your night at Freddy's. It's a never-ending cycle of one generation of dead bodies possessing the suits and looking for the next generation to replace them. The only part of the theory that seems to be all but confirmed is the luring and killing of the children. Newspaper clippings can appear randomly throughout the game, telling the story of two children who were lured and killed by a man dressed as a company mascot. The children being stuffed into the suits also seems to be confirmed by another newspaper clipping. The establishment was threatened with shutdown by the health department over reports of blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. This seems like a clear indication towards the possibility of the suits having been possessed. From today's point of view, with so many games and even books in the series slowly fleshing out the story more and more, this theory seems almost bizarre, like an alternate universe FNAF theory. I find it somewhat nostalgic to think back to a time when the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's didn't revolve around the Afton family or even Purple Guy, back when it was just a simple, somewhat believable story of a tragic event taking place at a children's restaurant and entertainment chain in the late 80s. I must admit that I missed this time in Five Nights at Freddy's history. It gave the whole experience a much more eerie vibe. As for this theory, you can definitely tell it's an early theory, and I'm definitely not going to try to convince you that it's correct. But I find it really interesting to see that these were the original ideas floating around the internet when the world was first introduced to Five Nights at Freddy's. So guys, thank you for watching the oldest Five Nights at Freddy's theory. This video was a bit different from what I usually do, but I think I'll be doing more and more of these kind of mini documentaries. If you have any subjects that I should make a video about, maybe some kind of creepypasta or maybe other Five Nights at Freddy's theories or whatever, make sure to comment them down below and I might make a mini documentary on that topic in the same style as this one. So if you enjoyed this mini documentary, please leave a like. It's a lot of work to make one of these. And if you have any friends that are interested in Five Nights at Freddy's, make sure to share this video with them. Just send it to them. I would really appreciate the support because these do take quite a while to make and it's quite a lot of work and research, but I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, as I just said, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.